Welcome to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing. I'm your host, Curtis Gibbs, as we explore the intersection of faith and veterinary medicine and those two roads that do cross. And we are on the road today with Katie Blount. Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Curtis, how are you?
Good. And what's fun is you're coming to me live from one floor down.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to our home. Tell our listeners what are you doing here in the Seattle area?
Well, I'm here in Seattle for pre-field orientation, which basically means as a long-term field worker, I'm here learning all of the things about security, budget, retirement, you name it. I am basically learning it over these last 3 days. So,
Love it. Thank you for bringing people into a little bit of the process. It's a blessing for us in the CVM home office to receive field workers on pre-field or furlough, which I believe is once every about three. Is that about the amount of time you come home? Maybe once every 3 years?
every 3 years, 2 years, depending on how you do your contract and things like that, which is also things that we discuss while we're here too.
Brilliant. And then,
Yeah.
even post, you mentioned like retirement. It's, people gotta have to remember this one thing that we try to do with CVM is as a sending organization is support you well. Like, you know what? Missionaries need insurance too. They also
Yeah.
need retirement too. Like you just
Yeah.
we don't always think of that.
No, we don't.
Well, good. Well, I'm excited for you. And, it's excited to have a young person go into the field. Let's take a step back. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you come to this spot where you are just about ready to launch?
Well, I I am a veterinary technician from Texas, and I basically grew up in a Christian home with strong men and women who, taught me about the Lord. And I live in a small town, and so we, always raised livestock. My parents did, it was just generation after generation of livestock raising. Um, but as a kid, I always knew that I would wanted to help people, whether it be, with animals, or I thought about physical therapy, or, I wanted to be a missionary because my family was very much into supporting missions and spreading the gospel. And so I ended up deciding to be a veterinary technician because, my love for animals was so strong. And I also, grew up with a way with animals because my dad, he was an ag teacher. He would take me places, and he was just like, you know what? Those animals are so much calmer when you're around than when it's just me by myself. So I just really learned that I had a way with animals, and God gave me that gift. Um, and so I went to tech school, and, did all of those things. And while I was in tech school, I actually met with a veterinarian who spent some time in Mongolia doing vet work there. And so I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe, once I kind of get my career going, maybe I'll start doing missions with that. And I got my career going, did all of that. And I went to a CE conference, and I came across the Christian Veterinary Missions booth. And I was like, this is interesting because I've been looking for something, but I, never found anything. And so I did that, and, really prayed about it, took pamphlets home, all of that. And then the next year I go back to that booth, and the veterinarian that I met while I was in tech school was standing there. His name was Glenn Gaines. And I was just like, you know what? This is where God's leading me, is to work with CVM. And, it didn't matter that I was a technician because there is work for any agriculture type based things. It's not just for veterinarians, veterinary professionals,
That's right.
which is
Shout out to
so
Tex, by the
awesome.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's so awesome. You don't even have to be a licensed tech or anything. And so, I really started moving forward with that. And, um, COVID kind of happened, so kind of put a little pause on it. And then, during COVID, my dad passed away to cancer. And I was just kind of like, I was praying to God. I'm like, what is my next? I mean, I knew I was going to go into mission work, but then COVID has happened. It's put a pause, I just was praying, where's my next? And next thing I know is Rocky Lindsay, who was the new region rep, gave me a call and was like, hey, are you interested in long-term missions? Because we're getting back on board. COVID's dying down, so let's get started. And so I was just like, okay, Lord, you've been giving me all the signs. You showed me Glen Gaines. You've told me, all sorts of things that you wanted me to do. And, so I've been following in those steps. And when I went to short course, that's when Fred told me about Rwanda, how they're working with widows and orphans and just raising livestock and all of that. And I ended up, when I went to Rwanda, I just fell in love with the people. They were so friendly and just so much, family oriented. I they've lost so much because of the genocide, but at the same time they're trying to restore and renew. And that's kind of been my story since my dad passed away. But in Rwanda, I'll be doing a lot of um, teaching and showing them how to raise livestock, which is what my dad did. He was an ag teacher. So I just felt that ag teacher connection, because even when I had some struggles during my career, I was going to just quit and become an ag teacher. So there's even just kind of that sign that this is where God is leading me to be. And so it's just been such an exciting story over these last several years, or, basically my whole life.
Mm.
But just getting all of that going. So,
So how did you, it sound, I mean, the fit looking back is great. I mean, your dad's a teacher, you have a teacher's heart, you have a heart for animals, you were trained as a vet technician and spent your life around animals, and all of a sudden here's this thing in Rwanda that's teaching and animals, it just matches. But how did you how'd you go about confirming or how did God kind of confirm that these were the next steps to take? What are some things that were like, I mean, you mentioned meeting Glenn after you'd already sort of met him, and that was just like, okay, God, but how did you discern what were some good steps that you took?
I did definitely a lot of prayer. I mean, prayer was number one, of like, God, is this what you're calling me to? And I even, when I first ran into Glenn Gaines at the booth, I started, with my church doing mission work, and then just different types of missions. I did one that was evangelistic. I did one that was kind of more of a working type one. So I was kind of like, okay, so I know what this is. And then after I went to short course with CVM, which kind of explains short-term missions versus long-term missions, just gives a big umbrella of CVM. I went on a short-term trip to Costa Rica, and so I learned even, how in a veterinary standpoint, how that kind of works. And so definitely, you know, I could see myself doing that. And I even was confirmed by Leanne, who was the leader for Costa Rica. She definitely was kind of like, I think you can do this. So she even affirmed for me
Mm,
that this is something that I could do. So it was just kind of one of those where I just went on different missions that were kind of all different kinds, and, prayer and, just reading my Bible, just really confirming with God, is this what I'm supposed to do? And constantly he would be telling me, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, I didn't even think about the ag teacher aspect of Rwanda
sure.
until a few weeks ago, where he was just like, you realize you're going to be an ag teacher,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
What a big click in that is. Like,
yeah.
whoa, okay,
I
yeah.
was like, oh, okay, this is what you told me I was going to do a while ago.
Yep, and
So,
right back to dad there. Well, how about the vision trip? I mean, that's something again where people are getting a little peek into the process. Our goal is to help people discern if going on the mission field is for them, not reach a certain quota or something, right? We're just doing
right.
whatever God's kingdom is, whether it's local or global. But you, how did then, okay, all these steps are going forward. I feel like I'm drawn to missions. This is something I kind of want to do with my life. How did you get from there to okay, specifically this spot in Rwanda? What was some of that?
So in Rwanda, I'll be working with a school. It's called ERM,
Okay.
and they're very much about equipping, restoring, and multiplying. And
Hmm.
so they do a lot of, I kind of explain it as a trade school. They teach culinary arts, welding, tailoring. I mean, you name it. It's just basically a way for the community to get out of poverty. And, when I was there, just seeing all of the work that they're trying to do, and they're not trying to like, here's you $5. Like, no, I'm going to give you a trade to where you can go make that $5,
Yeah.
things like
Teach a
that.
person to
So
fish kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And so I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I really love the way that they're doing this. They're not just doing handouts, they're getting them to learn a skill. And they also do scholarships. So with those scholarships, sometimes they give goats and chickens as a gift at Christmas, like because they're trying to help even their family. And so it was kind of one of those where I felt connected with what their um mission is, like just what they're trying to do. And even actually a lot of the workers that I met, one in particular, his name is John, he just like took me in. He understood my sarcasm. I could see myself being at his house at Christmas with his family. Like it was just, there was just that family vibe of how all the workers work together. And so,
Love it. Love
yeah.
it. And we do some things with our mission mobilization, like Dr. Graham and Rachel, his wife, who's also they served in the field together, is here with us. Going to be doing dinner after this, but Daniel took you as well on that vision trip to kind of help see some things, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah,
well,
we ended up going to Uganda for a few weeks, and he showed me how a goat training works. And I just thought it was how awesome how he led that goat training along with stories of the Bible. Like it was just so awesome. Like just putting those two together was so great. And so,
yeah, putting your faith and your vet med, like bringing those together. Well,
yeah.
that's awesome. Well, tell me about any resistance. I mean, have you met any had family been supportive, or you met any like spiritual like how has that gone?
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing when people have a hard time. That means they love you and they know they're going to miss you or not see you as much. So
Yeah.
that's part of the going afield. But
Yeah.
everybody, how's that gone? Everybody, family pretty supportive?
My family's been pretty supportive, but we're very much of if this is God is calling you to, I would hate for you to not do what you're doing
Yeah.
because otherwise God could make things worse or you'll eventually end up over there just like Jonah did. um, and so my family's super supportive. I've had some kickback with work. They're not super excited. They wish I would stay, but at the same time, they're, very accepting. Um, you know, fundraising has been, kind of hard. There's been ups and downs with doing the fundraising for my budget and just getting that one-time support along with the monthly support. Just, I've had some up and downs of just verbalizing what the needs are because
Yeah.
it takes a while of just getting the right conversation down, getting well, this is what I need, or this is, what God's calling you to, like trying to make sure you're not taking the glory away from God. And sometimes I shouldn't say I tend to not word it correctly and it sounds wrong. So,
Well, I mean, that's a tough thing for field workers, right?
yeah,
I think people need to realize, like, you not only are like giving up some of your life here, whatever you have going, but then you're raising the funds to go. You have to like raise 100% of your living expenses to go do this thing.
yeah,
And most field workers got into it to do the thing, not to raise the money to do the thing. And so like naturally but then you feel like, well, am I selling myself? Like this is a hard thing
yeah,
it's a hard process to ask for money when you have a a skill set that provides for yourself just fine, right? But
right,
that is why I think the kingdom of God needs to come around and support people like you even more, because it is that hard to kind of ask and have those moments where you sit down with a friend and ask them, hey, like, would you consider joining me in my mission? And
yeah,
it takes a lot for a person to get to that point to ask, but boy, you also know that they really believe and really feel called by God in what they're doing to get to
right,
that point. And that's a special thing to be asked, because you sort of know you're joining with them. Yeah.
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 Yeah, exactly.
Well, how, we got another question or two, but because we've just arrived at this thought, how can people follow you? How can people support you? I mean, by the time this airs, when I think this is going to air, is might be within days of you leaving. Frankly,
Yeah,
like I think we just got word that you are close to 100% supported. Not that you couldn't use more. Everybody could
exactly.
use 5% more because that's still going to go right to the work in Rwanda. But how can people find you, follow you, support you, pray for you? What can they do?
Well, one, they can go to my webpage, which is cvm.org/blunt. And it's spelled Blount. So, people can follow me there, sign up for my newsletter on there. If you're wanting to leave either recurring donation or just a donation in general, when you go to my webpage, there's a little spot at the top that says give. There's also just going on cvm.org, there's other plugs there. There's like animal impact, special projects. There's so many different things where you can give on there, but then you can even sign up for CVM's newsletter. And so there's just several places there. And if you have something special you want to say to me, they have my email and they can send it that way. But yeah, you can always even just shoot me an email. It's ktbug2008@yahoo.com. So
Love it. Yeah, my
yeah.
wife gets to be a lot of the liaison as you go. She'll be like doing the letters and all that. So it's a
Yeah.
fun thing that I encourage people to go read those because they're powerful, and she
They-
loves to do that. Let me return to one more thing though, as I think about the support and the way people have, generally been behind you and all that. A name that keeps coming up is Dad. It seems that Dad was big in supporting your faith and your calling and your journey. So, for those out there that maybe parents or just want to be supportive, how did he you feel so well supported there? How did he communicate? How did he show you that?
When I told him that I was looking into mission work and, I'd already gone to the booth and, just praying about it, all of that, he was so excited. Every time I turned around, he was telling somebody, my daughter is going to go be a veterinary mission person. And, she's,
Wow.
just, he was telling everybody. So I would see somebody I hadn't seen in a while and I'd see them at the grocery store and they were like, hey, I heard that you're going to go be a vet missions person. I was like, let me
Dad out
guess.
there
My dad
evangelizing your
told
story.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's huge though. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
special.
just how supportive he was. And even my grandfather, when I told him that I was planning on going to Rwanda, and he was, of the age he knew about the Rwanda genocide.
Sure.
He
94,
knew
yeah.
that from the news, and I told him, and he was like, I feel that it's a scary place, but I would hate to see how God gets you there if you don't go voluntarily.
Let's just go along with the big guy and yeah.
Yeah,
But isn't that so interesting about God? And we don't even know this part. I mean, God's going to use you, but God's going to also do so much stuff in you. Isn't that
yeah,
so neat to go? Like you weren't born and at the age of 5 were like, you know what? I'm going to move to Rwanda, right?
yeah,
Like, but somehow God, like, that's almost how you know it's God because it's so like,
yeah.
okay, this has to be God because the doors have just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's like when I went to short course, I didn't know where I wanted to go. Like I had nothing telling me that. And then when I think the first day I met with Fred just talking about different mission opportunities, he was the one who told me about Rwanda and that was the one that just clicked. I was
yeah.
like, okay, I feel like something is just calling me there. So,
I love it. Yeah. Well, it's your story is also fun and gratifying to hear just in a small way, because so many people have had a little bit of your journey. And as me working at CVM, just hearing like Glenn Gaines, he was a region rep, he was at a professional conference. That's what we do. Like we go there to
yeah,
get to work. Rocky Lindsay following up on a list of people who have shown interest. We do long-term mission calls. Sometimes you're like, is this making a difference? Is this going to help? short course that, Daniel and Rachel and all these people that have put this on, and Fred and and the steps of actually then going on a vision trip. And they just, it's nice to see that those things have been really helpful and part of the journey. And I just encourage people, like, and of course, like your dad, but even smaller roles, like encouraging people like you to follow your story, follow where God's taking you, wherever that may be. How can I help you discern this? How can I help you take the next step? It feels like it wasn't just one thing; it was a bunch of little things, but
Yeah.
God working in all those. That's pretty encouraging to see.
Yeah. Yeah. God has always been great of like, I'm going to tell you about this now, but you're not ready for it. But I'm going to tell you about it. And then as you move through, the years, I'll tell you when it's time,
Wow. Yeah,
So
love it. Well, Katie, that's an awesome story. We're super excited for you. And by the time we'll be hearing this, you might even be getting ready to go. So I hope people will jump over and support you, pray for you, give to you, follow what's going on with you. And I know we will be doing so. So we love to end with three questions. And so, one of those three questions is always just a little on the fun side because you've been a vet technician. Shout out again to vet techs. We're just as much about them as practice managers, as students, as pre-vets, as veterinarians. Um, but you've worked in vet med for a while, so surely there's a fun story in there somewhere. So I'd love to ask you, what is a fun story that you've experienced serving in veterinary medicine?
I will say, I mean, there's multiple funny stories. I mean, I've
Yeah.
going through the list, but I will say one of the funniest ones, and I think it was just my reaction more than anything, is when I was on my vision trip, John took me to some places that already had some animal projects and things like that. So I went to this one, and this guy had a couple of pigs, and the ferrying house was great. They were able to get out. Like it was all this different stuff. I mean, everything looked great. But then the guy was asking me, he was like, I just don't understand. My pigs keep turning red and I give them all this medicine. Nothing fixes it. I just wait a few days and then, they're fine. And I'm like, okay. And I automatically think, what crazy exotic disease does
Sure,
this pig
like
have? Like,
1040 window, unique.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, what does it have? And then I was like, okay, wait a minute. I still need a few more questions answered. And so I asked him and I was like, okay, like, what do they eat? I'm like, when you let them out, what time of day do you let them out? And he was like, well, like noon to 2. And it like dawned on me. I was like, well, no medicine's going to fix what your pigs have. And I had to explain to him, like, you see my white skin? If I get out from 12 to 2 and I sit in the sun for that long, my skin turns red and nothing fixes it but lotion. And I was like, you're sunburning your pigs. And in my mind, I'm like, I just want to tell him you're making chicharrones a little too early. They're not even gone yet. So, but I'm like, he's not going to understand that.
You're thinking like that's hilarious. Like what antibiotic, what viral, like antiviral. It really you just like need like SPF, just
Yeah.
rubbed off.
Just get them some sunscreen, keep them from burning.
I mean, Occam's razor. Sometimes it's the most simple thing that that's so good. Um, why do you love veterinary medicine?
Um, I mean, there's multiple reasons. I mean, I get to help people, but I also get to work with animals, the gift that God gave me. But sometimes it's just so awesome being, the technician and just being the one that, advocates for the owner as well as the patient. Like, I get to sit there and, sometimes even just being with them when it's that time for them, to go. It's time for the animal to be put down because they are so unhealthy and just being there supporting the owner and supporting the person and sometimes I use that opportunity to even share with them with God. So even here in the US and just being in those vet offices and clinics, you're able to even share the gospel with them there. But it's just kind of one of those no matter where you are, there's always a mission field, but there's just something about the connection between humans and animals. It's just, I love it so much.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, and it's going to be equally important, if not more, in some cases, for those in the developing context. What those
yeah,
animals mean to their survival, their family, their bank account. That's a huge deal. Yeah,
yeah.
awesome. Well, what's one last thing you'd love to say to encourage um, those listening to Roads Crossing?
Um, you know, I would just have to say, just keep doing what God's calling you to do, and it may seem like he's calling you somewhere, but just, you don't know what time it's going to be, I between my dad's passing away and going through all of the different deputation things with going to Rwanda, I just remind myself of Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything. And so um that's kind of what I try to remind people of, is just having patience and confidence. And, there's a time that God has for you for what he's called you to do.
Amen.
So,
A season for everything, right?
everything. Yeah.
Well,
So,
cheers. Katie, we'll be praying for you. We're behind you. We're excited for you. We're happy
yeah.
for you to be on CVM staff. Shout out to, field workers, right? And so,
Woo!
right. So, well, good. Well, we will be doing that. Thank you for sharing today, and we'll have to check in on you, see how things are going, and just thank
Yeah.
you for showing us how to live well at the
Thank you.
intersection of two roads crossing. Thanks,
Yes.
Katie.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you were blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.